One of the things you want to do every now and again is just tune up your game. Make sure everything's working right. Make sure your animations and your objects are in order. If you notice the way we set it up last week, she can't even jump high enough to get up on the platform. And then the other thing is when she does jump up on the platform, which I'll show you later, she kind of can slide right off it sometimes. So I'm going to show you how to tune up her movement a little bit. But before we do anything, we have to make a copy of this game so we have a backup. I'm going to go to my games, and here's my game from February 24th when we started. I want you to pause the video and get to this screen so you have your last version of the game in front of you. Pause the video and do that now. Okay, so you should have something that's titled like this. If your game says new game right now, you want to change the name of it. But once you have the game that you worked on last week up, you're going to go ahead and clone it. And then you're going to take the copy that you just made and rename it to whatever today's date is for you. And now this is the version we're going to work on, and this will be our backup. So let's hit edit. Okay, and you can always double check and make sure you're on the right version of the game by just clicking on settings here and double checking. Don't change this name though. One thing I want to do is get the walls off screen. I want there to be boundaries. Watch what happens if she goes over here. Boom, she just fell off the world. So we want to prevent that. And what we're going to do is delete these wall blocks and then reapply them right here. So one of the easiest way to delete a whole bunch of blocks is to hold the delete key on your keyboard and just hover over the blocks. Then you're going to go to your library, click on your wall block, and then hit add to level. And then just off screen, you're going to put the wall blocks so she doesn't fall off the world. And then hit done cloning. So go ahead, pause the video and do that now. Okay, to double check that and just make sure it works, you can hit play on the game. Over to the left side, nothing happens. And then go over to the right side, make sure she doesn't fall off. Okay, now we're going to tune the controls a little bit, specifically the jumping controls. And we do that by going on the player object, hitting edit, and then we're going to go to behaviors. Your movements should be in a bundle. Just double click on it to open it up. And up at the top, we have the left-right movement, and down at the bottom, we have the jump movement. Once you get this open, try to figure out a way to make her jump higher. Try to make your player jump just high enough to get on this first platform. Go ahead and pause. Okay, the way I did it is I just hit play here so I can see the player moving. And then I'm going to hit the jump force that we set and just turn it up a little bit. I'll turn it up to 16. And actually, that's a little too high for me. So I'm going to turn it back down a little bit to 14. And that works just fine. Now, the second thing we're going to do is I noticed there was a problem when I was playing this. Sometimes like that. She jumps up and she'll just keep sliding right off the platform. Sometimes she does it, sometimes she doesn't. There, she just did it again. So I couldn't figure this out, and I actually spoke with the Flowlab owner, and he told me that sometimes there is a problem with the Capsule Collider. I'm going to hit stop here and go back out to the main screen to her physics. Physics has the shape of the collider, and you can think of this as an invisible circle, rectangle, capsule, or polygon that's around here that detects when she hits other things, detects collisions. That's why it's called collision shape. And we use the capsule shape to prevent her from being able to stick to the walls and climb. But I'm going to go back to circle. Now watch what happens. She's able to stick to the walls again, but we're going to fix that problem. Go ahead, go to the player physics, change it back to circle, pause the video and do that, and then come back here. So now that we have a circle collider back on her, it should fix the problem of her sliding off the platforms randomly. And I've tested it out a lot, and it does. But immediately I notice something else. Now she's jumping super high. I didn't plan on that. And she also will stick to the wall if you jump up against it and hold in that direction. And this is why I'm showing you this video. This isn't the only thing you're going to tune in the game, but I want you to get in the mindset that that programming and building programs or building games is a process of troubleshooting and debugging and optimizing. Coders spend most of their time fixing the problems in their code because nothing works the first time. You're building something that hasn't really been built before. So even though I'm showing you this example, keep this in mind throughout your game. If something goes wrong, you should try to fix it right away before moving on. We fixed one problem, and now we have two other ones. So let's go back into the movements. And the first thing you should do is kind of break the problem down into smaller pieces. For example, asking yourself, when is this problem happening? Where is this problem happening? Every behavior has a trigger, which is like the if or like the when. If there's a mouse click, do something. If I press down on the keyboard, do something. Or when I'm in the air, do something. So I have to figure out these two statements. When is this happening and what is happening? And sometimes it helps to just jot it down in human language. And this is called pseudocode. And this is a very popular way of problem solving and programming. So I'm just going to try to break the problem down into a simple English sentence. Player. So here's my problem. Very basically, the player sticks to the wall when in the air. The goal, player does not stick to wall when in the air. I'm going to further break this down. The problem is sticking to the wall. Sticking is one object interacting with another. And if you remember from the time we did the object lesson, that there's three main things you're controlling when you make the game. The way the object looks, the way it interacts with other objects, and the things it does in the world. And this is really a problem of a player interacting with a wall. So it's a physics problem first, but it's happening at a certain time, so it's also a behavior problem. So let's go into the physics. Now, what I want you to do is think about the problem. Sticks to wall. What physics property might cause something to stick more or stick less? Think about sliding something across the floor. Pause the video and try to figure that out. Okay, so hopefully you figured out that it is friction. Friction is how much resistance there is when something slides across something else. And our player has about 50% friction, and so do all the other objects in the game. And we're just going to leave it like that. So going back to the original problem, we know that sticking has to do with friction. And if we want no sticking, then we probably want no friction. So I can rewrite this. Player has no friction when in the air. She has no friction when she's in the air. She's not going to stick to anything. However, we do want her to have friction most of the time. Otherwise, she's just going to slide right across everything. So we have to create a behavior that when the player's in the air, she has no friction. Player has no friction when in the air. Okay, let's go to the behaviors. Go into our behavior bundle. And you want to be on this screen for this. So pause the video if you're not here and get to this screen. Now, one of the first problems we noticed once we put the circle collider on was that she jumps way too high. I think you know how to fix that problem. I want her to be just high enough to get up on this platform. So I'm just going to lower this a little. I'm going to set it at 11. So we have to figure out a way that the computer knows that the player is in the air. Well, if you think back to how we made the jump, how did we know that the player was on the ground? We used the ray cast, and the ray cast has this little tiny ray that you could make longer or shorter, and it detects when the player is hitting something or not hitting something. So here we have it detecting the ground, and she will only jump. This will only work when the player is on the ground, as detected by the raycast. So we need kind of the opposite now. We need to know when she's not on the ground. And we are going to use a raycast for that. Find your raycast. And two more things we're going to use for this are the number blocks. Remember, we're trying to change the friction when she's in the air. So I have two number blocks. And then the third block, which you probably don't know about, is called a material block. And this is how your player or whatever interacts with materials in your game world. And you can see there's a friction setting here. So go ahead, get these blocks up, pause the video, and come back when you're done. So now that you have these blocks set up, let's kind of figure out how we're going to wire this up. If you remember here, our raycast, which you can see right here, our ray has to be detecting the ground. It has to be hitting the ground for any of this to happen. If you press W when she's in the air, none of this will work because she's not hitting the ground. Well, up here, we want to detect when she's hitting the ground, we want the friction on. And when she's not hitting the ground or missing it, we want the friction off. And one way of turning friction off is just setting it to 0. So let's go ahead and change this label. I'm going to put friction air. So friction when she's in the air. And I'm going to leave it at 0. And then this one, I'm going to put friction ground. And if you remember, friction was set to 50, and we want it to be 50 on the ground. Let's set up our raycast. It should be pretty much exactly the same as this one. You want the ray pointing down, and you want it to be about 19, which is just below her feet. So that's good. I'm not going to choose ground here. I'm just going to choose anything under her feet. If she's not detecting anything under her feet, she's in the air. When she hits anything under her feet, we want to get 50 and set this friction to 50. However, when nothing is under her feet, or when the ray is missing something, we want the friction to be 0. Pause the video, go ahead, get this set up, and then when you're done, come back here. Make sure you label both and get the numbers right and get them connected right. Looking at this, we have this block of code for moving left and right, this block for jumping, and this one's going to turn her friction on and off. What are we missing from this? We have the behavior right here. We have the what happens. What are we missing from this? Well, we're missing a trigger. This is never going to turn on unless we trigger it. Now we have to ask ourselves, when do we want this turned on? Well, we always want it turned on because we always want to be able to tell whether she's in the air or on the ground. So this is where this always block comes on. It's like a battery that's always on. And we always want it to cast a ray and detect whether she's on the ground or whether she's in the air. So if she hits the ground, friction goes on to 50. If she's in the air, friction goes to 0. Now, let's test and see if it works. Boom. She is no longer sticking to objects, and she is no longer randomly sliding. So go ahead, get this powered up, test it out, and then come back to the video when you're done. So hopefully everything's working. If you don't have anything working right now, go ahead, raise your hand, and I'll come help you. But the final thing we're going to do is just stay organized. So I'm going to put these in their own little boxes, and I'm going to do that, especially this one. I don't want to see this all the time because we know it's working. I'm just going to bundle it and rename it to friction control. I'm not going to add it to the menu. I just want to keep it neat here. And you don't have to do this, but I'm going to do it. because I know how messy things can get, I'm going to take this code, bundle it, and rename it left, right. And then I'm going to take the bottom code here, highlight it, and bundle it, and name it, you guessed it, jump. Okay, so in this video, we fixed the problem of her sliding off the platforms. We adjusted her jump height, and we prevented her from ever sticking to the walls while she's in the air. Now you're going to go on to the animations video. And if you have any trouble or something didn't work out, raise your hand and let me know before you go to the next video. Okay, good job.